Hello, welcome back to New Earth Story Time. Today we're reading Chapter 8 from the metaphysical fiction We Came Here to Play. And once again, my name is Dawn. If this is the first time you're dropping in, welcome, and we hope that you'll continue on and go back and catch the other chapters. Okay, let's begin. So, Chapter 8 is The Hidden Temple. As the orientation concluded and we gathered our few things, I could feel the sense of general overwhelm among the group in terms of not really knowing where to start exploring this fascinating new reality. Sage and Kai seemed to have been here a bit longer than the rest of us, and they offered to help bring the newest members of our group up to speed with getting familiar with the place. We split off into two groups so we wouldn't be obviously an obvious group of fledgling explorers bumbling around en masse. I also got that none of us felt ready to start interjecting ourselves into the social fabric here alone. Our groups fell together naturally, maybe sensing an overlapping purpose, as Max had mentioned. Callie, Luna, and Sage formed a group. Kai, Xander, and I were a second team of sorts. Before we left the orientation room, Max reminded us to check the list at the front of the room for who we would be sharing transport vehicles with. I was thinking maybe we would have to reshuffle our groups, but we had intuitively grouped in the same way the vehicle assignments were made. I'm becoming aware of how easily everything flows here just by following what feels right. I think it's that shift in focus from head to heart Joelle and I had touched on this morning. I also feel unprepared for how to best support Xander because I have limited experience with autism spectrum challenges. I'm wondering why, in this upgraded dimension, some people are still dealing with physical issues. This whole interdimensional thing is a mystery to me. Kai got that the first thing the two of us needed to do was to check with Xander, since it's obvious the compressed entry experience was a lot for him to process. I'm glad to have Kai paired up with us because he's a little older, probably 20, and has that aloha vibe that I associate with Hawaiians, which just brings a sense of calm. The perplexing question for me really is, how did Xander end up here and why? Xander, I said, as I sat next to him with Kai standing off to my side, what do you most need right now? He was looking ahead at the floor, and it was obvious he didn't want to make eye contact with either one of us. He was fidgety, and I noticed he was clutching a folded piece of paper in his hands. Xander, is that something you would be willing to let us see? I asked as I glanced up at Kai with a look to convey, maybe this will tell us something. Xander relaxed his hand and let me take the piece of paper. I knew that he could use language because he had spoken enough to have a voice scan when Trevor was with him. Maybe it was Trevor's centered presence and way of putting people at ease that had made that possible. But right now, Xander didn't want to say much. I unfolded the paper slowly and reverently, getting that this was something of great importance to him. I never expected to see what was there. An intricate pen and ink drawing of Escalante de Luz, with all of the pods, including the details like the columned pathway with opened books to the Intergenerational Learning Center. The only thing that looked out of place was what appeared to be some type of temple. The front wall of the primary triangle structure had one solitary pane of glass, etched as a magnificent tree. A second windowless triangle behind it completed the building. In the picture, the structure was sitting in the middle of an old cottonwood grove. I looked over at Kai and said, "This looks like Escalante de Luz, except for this," as I pointed to the pyramid-shaped building. Kai responded, "That's the temple to the divine. It sits out in the cottonwood grove, just past the rejuvenation rooms." Our mouths were both gaping open, and now we were all speechless. "Xander, did you draw this picture?" Kai asked. Xander nodded yes. "And you brought it through with you when you came here?" Kai inquired respectfully. Again, he nodded yes. "Do you want to go to the shared space where people here make art?" I queried. Xander looked up and quietly said, "Not yet. First I want to go here," as he pointed to the temple in the trees. I realized that I have a lot to learn, beginning with reframing what I had considered to be special needs or challenges prior to coming here. What if instead we thought of them as children with special gifts, and then stretched ourselves to understand their world? "I haven't been to that temple yet, so that sounds perfect," I said, appreciating the company I was in. Kai nodded his approval as well, saying, "It's about a 15-minute walk. Does that work for both of you?" "Absolutely," I said. "Walking helps me connect with a place." Kai smiled and said, "Malama Ka'aina." "What does that mean?" Xander asked, letting his body relax into the bubble of calm he felt himself bathed in by Kai and me. "It's a basic understanding of my people that means love and live in harmony with the land. Walking puts us at a pace where her words can be heard through the elements, such as the whispers in the wind." Xander said, "I'm good with walking to the temple. Let's go." We silently walked the community center paths to where they ended, and then followed the winding dirt trail into the trees. I had gotten a bit ahead of Kai and Xander. About 100 yards from the temple, a tapa cloth with what appeared to be sacred markings was laid on the ground, with simple fresh offerings of fruits, nuts, and little sandwiches on sprouted bread. Around the food was sitting a string of some kind of large wooden polished beads. I could see there was a note with it, and I picked it up and read it as I waited for the other two to catch up. As they approached, Kai was particularly interested in what was there, recognizing how out of place it was. He saw me reading the note and asked, "What does it say?" "It says, 'Offerings to nurture your bodies as you prepare to nurture your souls.'" I said, intrigued by how someone could have known we were coming here and prepared this when we only decided to come 15 minutes ago. "I think this is for you, isn't it, Kai?" I said, recognizing that it would have particular significance for him. "Yes and no," he said, as he reached down and picked up the strand of glossy brown beads. "This is a kukui ano ano, or kukui seedlay. The spiritual meaning of it is light, hope, and renewal. In addition to it being a beautiful lei, it is used as prayer beads, and it becomes more beautiful over time with the prayers held in it. It is also for protection." Kai turned to Xander and said, "I believe this is for you. May I?" he asked, as he held the lei up, indicating he would like to place it around Xander's neck. Xander rather awkwardly said, yeah, okay, I guess," barely yielding the rigidity in his tall, lanky frame as he reluctantly let Kai drape it over his head. "When we go into the temple, I will take the tapa cloth to place on the altar with any remaining food we haven't eaten," Kai said, as he motioned to the ground, inviting us to eat. Kai walked to the side of where we were sitting. His arms were relaxed at his side, but with the palms open to the front of him. He began to chant, closing his eyes as he dropped into a place of total stillness from which pure beingness flows. The words were unfamiliar, but the powerful reverence they conveyed was unmistakable, and a chill ran up my spine. It was like the blessing before a meal, but more, and Xander and I knew not to help ourselves to the food until he was complete. Kai opened his eyes after finishing the chant and just stood there for a few moments, as if he was listening and waiting for a reply. Just then a small blue songbird flitted from the tree we were seated next to, and swooped down to pick up a seed from the tapa cloth. When it felt appropriate, I quietly said, "That was beautiful. Can you tell us about it?" At this point, Xander was noticing his hunger and picked up one of the sandwiches and began eating. His eyes were fixed on the temple, but darted occasionally in Kai's direction, obviously curious about what he had to say. The chant is one of many I learned from my kumu. A kumu is a teacher, and what they teach is indicated by what follows kumu. For example, kumuhulu, kumuhula is the teacher of the traditional dance. Kumuoli is the teacher of the chants, which are the sacred stories of our people. Since the hula doesn't have meaning without the chants or stories, it is most common to just say my kumu or kumuhula. Anyway, I was one of the youth in a group for youth leadership my kumu had started to help us remember the traditional stories of our people and to use them as a foundation for creating the new story. He taught us the protocol of chanting to ask permission to enter a space, whether it is a building or a natural setting. The chant is done whether or not any people are physically present in the space. We ask permission to enter from all energies that are there. Then you wait for a sign or a feeling sense that you have been received. It is a protocol of respect and being conscious of where you are at all times. I obviously don't stop to chant each time I go to a friend's house or go to the grocery store or to other routine locations. I tend to do it when I sense I am in the presence of something new, something powerful, something sacred. It is also a way of bringing me into the now with greater awareness, so that I don't harm myself or others by being fragmented. In this particular place, it is to acknowledge the energies of those who dwell here in spirit, or who have visited here with their offerings of love and gratitude. "So it is the question you are here to answer, if you don't mind my asking," I said, mystified by why he would have come here when he seems so well guided by his kumu in the other dimension. I guess there is a two-part answer to that question. First of all, I think that most of us, the interdimensionals, who have synced up with this dimension are more found than we are lost. But the time-space reality we were born into is still working through some pretty dense stuff. It can feel impossible at times to pull away from the magnetic of the heavier emotions of fear, separation, and not enoughness in the collective field, and we start to identify with them. Even those who try to cut themselves off from being bombarded by the negative messages of the world still feel the weight of the limiting story. Trying to manifest anything different can feel like swimming through quicksand. Max said it in Murientation. We are here to get familiar with what it feels like to live in the future possibility, so when we return to our previous time-space reality, we have more conviction to fulfill our individual purposes. It's like when my sister used to tape her radio dial to the channel she wanted, because the slightest nudge would change the frequency and it would go staticky. So we are basically here to tape ourselves to this frequency. As far as my question for the game, it has to do with how the stories of my people can translate in a larger context and influence the choices that are being made. Kai paused and sort of sighed. That was probably a lot more than you wanted to hear, and I know Xander was anxious to get here. So let's finish eating and go in. I was ready to go on, but I couldn't help thinking about what Kai had shared and how it related to the difference I was experiencing here, when doubts would arise in me about not being able to live up to people's expectations of me. It's like there was no place for the thought to land, no power supply to engage it. Curious. There was an apple and a few almonds left over after we had eaten all that we wanted. Kai gathered them up with the tapa cloth to place on the front of the altar inside. As we entered the back windowless section of the temple, it felt very cool and cave-like. Motion detectors sensed our entry, and small light fixtures, like those over artwork, softly illuminated the various alcoves. Each one paid homage to the avatars and saints of the different religious traditions throughout time. None of the religious icons took priority on the open front altar. Instead, there was a sense that all holy beings had come in service to the earth, as depicted by the Tree of Life, spreading its arms across one massive altar window. I imagined that at the right time of day, the sun's angled rays would illuminate the heart of the temple as they streamed through the etched branches of the tree. Kai went directly to the altar to leave the tapa and the offerings we were passing on from what had been gifted us. He noticed there was a thin book laid on a long wooden table at the base of the stairs leading up to the altar, and he went over to look at it. I've been making a more general sweep around the outer walls, appreciating the overall feeling of peace. Xander was seated near the alcove with Christ and appeared to be praying. Whatever was in the book on the table, it seemed to have caught Kai's attention, and he set down what he was holding to pick it up and read it. I could see the title on the book as I approached. I dreamed I was normal, and I commented, "That seems like an unusual title for a book in a temple." Kai flipped the book around to see the title and said, "Yeah, it is. And I believe it was left as a clue for us to help Xander play the game." "Why? What does it say?" "It's about a woman who works with autistic children and how she discovers that she can communicate with this one boy by having him guide her hand on a computer keyboard to type out what he wants to say. He tells her that autistic children connect with each other in dream time because there they are free of the challenges they have in their bodies. Thus, I dreamed I was normal. He also tells her that he can come into her dreams if she focuses on meeting him there. She ends up being able to do it after trying a few times, and following a very real experience with him in her dreams, she tells him about it and he guides her hand to type out. You did it, Kai surmised. So do you think this is telling us to take Xander to the business or learning center so we can use a keyboard to have him help us understand what he needs? I pondered as I got used to playing detective. No, I don't think so, Kai said. And I could almost see the wheels in his mind turning. He speaks if he wants to, and he obviously communicates through drawing. I think this whole game idea is overwhelming to him. I mean, nothing is familiar to any of us, and for him it seems particularly challenging. I think this clue is suggesting that we help him navigate to an environment that will feel safe for him to interact with people in the community. Then I put it together. The collective dream space. I guess I missed that on my tour of the community, Kai said. Where is it? It's in the observatory. Do they do it every night? Kai asked. I don't know. Maybe we can use the GPS function on the TD to see if we can get schedule information, I suggested, as I pulled out my TD, pressed the GPS icon, and asked for the schedule for the collective dreaming in the observatory. Immediately it came up, and it seemed they only did it once a week. Do you know what day it is? I asked Kai, realizing I had no reference point for that since my arrival. Kai had a similarly confused look on his face as well, but just then my TD beeped, and I looked down to see that it was highlighting the day we were on. We're in luck, I said. There's one tonight. Do we need to reserve a space? Kai wondered out loud. I lifted the TD back up to voice level, about ready to ask it to call the observatory, when a message flashed across the screen. Reservation for 3, confirmed for 9 p.m. Kai and I glanced at each other, shook our heads with a look of amazement, and simultaneously said, Wow, these people are way ahead of us. We turned to see if we could spot Xander in the dimly lit back section of the temple. He was done praying, and he was tiptoeing around the space, checking out the other alcoves. I would have thought the tiptoeing was a gesture of reverence in the temple, but I had noticed him tiptoeing in other buildings we had been in during orientation. It was almost like he was trying not to be heard, in hopes that he would also not be seen. I also realized that he was still wearing what I presumed to be the standard issue for males arriving through the portal. It was the same material as the shift I had been given when I arrived. I did notice that he had on some basic slip-on shoes, sort of like Chinese martial arts shoes. My guess is that given the community's awareness of Xander's sensitivities to touch, they had provided what would be most comfortable. Xander, I said, I know lots happened for you today, but I want to check in with you to make sure you are comfortable in what you're wearing. We can go and find some other clothes for you if you want to have more choices of things to wear. No, he said, shaking his head. This feels good. What about a hoodie or something soft to cover your arms for when it gets cooler tonight? I said, surprised by how motherly I had become after being given the responsibility of helping Xander. I don't know, he said. Well, would you feel comfortable going to the reused store and hanging out while I look for some things for myself? And Kai, are you wanting to hang out with us until we go to the observatory tonight? I asked as I turned to check in with him. I could, but I would prefer to go over to the Rossum Cafe to play chess with someone I met there yesterday, who said she would be there again today, he confessed. I'm cool with that, I replied, actually relieved that I could spend more time at the reuse center without worrying about Kai being bored. Xander, another option is that I could take you to the art studios and find a place for you to draw while I do my shopping. I could see him struggling with the choice, and I was picking up his stress of being alone in another place he was unfamiliar with, even though drawing was a better way for him to express what was going on. It's not like he knew me or Kai well, either, but we had managed to establish a basis of trust. I'll go with you, Xander said hesitantly. Okay, sweet, I said, thinking maybe he would change his mind about a hoodie or something like that if we found the right thing. Kai, maybe we'll see you at the Rossum Cafe later. We won't interrupt your chess game, though, I said, in sort of a little sister-teasing way, hoping to see if I could get a reaction that would indicate what kind of interest he had in this new friend. The next hour and a half flew by as I picked my way through the treasures at the Reuse Center. Xander pretty much sat on a chair in the corner by the dressing rooms playing around with his new TD. I was able, however, to get him to try on a couple of hoodies and found one that met his approval. I'm also really digging the whole transaction account system and how easy it is to make a purchase, and I'm surprised to see I have already registered a credit today. Just as we were leaving the Reuse store, I thought it would be good to take my purchases back to my room. Then I realized that Trevor had rushed back from the canyon with Xander to get him to the orientation this morning, probably hadn't had time to show him to his guest room. It seemed that no sooner had I thought that than we ran into Trevor. I thought I might find you here, he said. Did you find some more treasures? Yeah, I said, almost guilty for the abundance I was now experiencing. Oh, be mindful, he said lightly. That guilt will create a debt in your transaction account, and you don't want to wipe out the credit you've already gotten. Yeah, what's that about anyway? I asked, glad that he brought it up. It's for your willingness to help Xander get oriented here, he explained. I can see that this transaction account could pretty quickly make a person aware of where their thoughts are. So basically, every time I judge myself or someone else, feel jealous, inadequate, or whatever, it's going to show up as a debit, right? I probed further. Yep. And all of the better feeling thoughts are going to show up as credits. It's a great way to build awareness because it's completely objective. You can't get upset with a meter for registering energy, but you might get bent out of shape by someone pointing out what you're not seeing, Trevor explained. Trevor then turned his attention to Xander. Today's probably been a bit of a rough day with so much change so fast, yeah? It's okay, Xander said. It doesn't feel so loud and prickly here. It will get even better, Trevor said kindly. The frequency of this place should feel more familiar and safe to you than where you've come from. But it could take a little while to fully repair the sensory overload and conditioned reactive patterns. That's actually true for all of you to some extent, Trevor said, speaking more to me. The difference with Xander is that his sensory sensitivities were activated at a higher level before coming here. And so it was harder for him to filter out the harsh overstimulation of your dimension. Anyway, Xander, I was wondering if you would like me to take you to the room you will be staying in while you're here. Yeah, that would be good, he said, looking like he was ready for some downtime. Xander, Kai, and I have a reservation tonight for the collective dreaming in the observatory, I said, wondering how to find Xander later to get him over to that pod. The contact information for everyone from the orientation this morning has been programmed into each of your TDs, so you can easily find each other. While you're in the GPS function, you just say, "Find Xander," and it will show you where he is. Trevor said to Xander, "Right this way," and they headed off in the direction of the guest rooms. He turned back around to me as I stood there wondering what I was going to do next, and he said, "Have a great time tonight. In the meantime, I highly recommend the rejuvenation rooms if you haven't tried them." Okay. And so thank you again for joining us on this chapter of We Came Here to Play. And I look forward to you being a part of this group and holding this wonderful energy for the possibility we can all create together. See you next chapter.